Yes.
Yeah.
I was working late one night in the West End Cafe for the Air Force, all the Air Force, every squadron, and his crew, Ken's crew, the Australian crew came in, 461, and they came into dinner, and I was taking orders behind Ken, and one of the crew said, Ken was looking up at me, and one of the crew said, I think he likes you, and that was it that night. And the next night he came in on his own, and he said, how long are you working for? I said, 8 o'clock. And he said, what are you going to do after that? And I said, I'm going to the pictures. And he said, do you mind if I tag along? And I said, yes, you can. And I said, but I've got to go home first and get changed. And he said, well, I'll come with you. And he came with me, and I walked into the house, and I said, my father nearly dropped dead because he said,
Keep going on.
what are you doing with an Australian? And I said, I'm going to the pictures with him. And from then on, we were, and in 1945, we got married in Wales, in St John's Church, and we've been together for 69 years.
That's
Thank
lovely.
you. Thank you. Whereabouts did you live in Pembroke Dock?
What's that?
Where did you live? In Pembroke Dock.
Top of Park Street, just under the
I
wall.
lived in Park Street, but first of all I lived in Princess Street, but the house that I lived in got a direct hit with a bomb, and we lost everything. And then we couldn't get a house because all the places had been bombed out, so they put a whole lot of tents up on Imble paddock up into Imble Lane, but aircraft came over one night and they thought it was a military camp. They thought it was a soldiers' camp, and they started bombing it, and they killed a lot of people and all the cows up there. But we happened to be in a tent that was right down the other end, and we were surprised we didn't get killed. And then we got a little cottage up in Park Street, which wasn't big enough for the whole family, because there was myself, mum and dad, and I had a brother, Charlie, and Billy. And so we stayed in this little cottage for a while, and then we moved to Merrick Street, 89 Merrick Street. And that's
right,
where,
right at the
yeah.
top, on the right hand side.
Wow.
that's it.
And Billy, Ken, do you want to say who we were at, please?
My name is Ken May. I'm from Perth in Western Australia.
Speak up.
Born in Albany originally.
I'm born in Albany, yes, which is in the Great Southern. When with the war on, once I turned 18, I was conscripted into the what was then known as the 16th Battalion, the Cameron Highlanders, and after a short introductory period, we attended a training course, and for some unknown reason they took us down to the firing range, and we were firing shots at targets, and I finished up being a machine gunner on a Vickers machine gun. That was all right, you didn't have to carry a rifle, but when you went on long route marches and things of that nature, you used to either carry the tripod or the barrel, gun barrel. With that period of time, the Japanese were coming down from the Far East, and there were bombing raids in Broome and Darwin and all that. One day I went on went absent on leave to ask my mother whether I could join the Air Force. Whilst I was absent, and no one knew I was absent, the people came around the tents, cabins and so forth, wanting to know whether there was anyone interested in joining the RAF. Luckily, one of my mates there put my name down because he knew I... And within a very short period of time and a couple of medical exams, I received a letter saying that I was accepted. And in November 52, I pulled out of the...
42.
42.
That's it,
42,
1942, sorry, 1942. I resigned from the army, and the very next day I joined the Air Force.
Was there any fuss with the army because you left for one and to go to the other?
No trouble at all, no trouble at all. I wasn't the only one.
I know.
They took us into a initial training camp, shall we say. First we went to, spent a week or two in a place in Fremantle, in the Princess May Girls' School, I was billeted there. And after that we went to the initial training course, which is then in Clontarf, which these two know well. We live only about 2 miles from there now.
Yeah, only a few miles from there, yeah.
It was only open paddocks and so forth at that time. And we spent a little bit of time there doing initial training, and they decided whilst I was there that I'd be wireless, signals, gun and so forth. So we finished up in Ballarat in the Victoria, north of Melbourne, and spent a little while there training on what was then our wireless procedure. That course completed, we then moved to Sale, where I did a gunnery course. I must say I didn't necessarily enjoy that. It was a single type plane with a cabin pilot in front of me in the back, and we used to fire at targets, yeah, those. After completing that course, they sent us on pre-embarkation leave, and I came back to Perth to see my mother. My two brothers were in the army. My sister was in the women's army, and my younger sister was a bit too young to be in any at that time.
Which part of the army were your brothers and where did they go?
They went up to, Jack went up to New Guinea, and he was in the signals. Phil went to Borneo. He was more or less engineer, sapper, you know, blowing up bridges and all the rest of it. Unfortunately, both of them passed away due to war-caused injuries. In the meantime, I came back from Perth off leave, and as far as I can recall, I went to Sydney, and we boarded a ship, I think it was a P-26, and we were sailing across the Pacific, landing in, sailing under the Golden Gate Bridge, landing in Oakland in America. Then we caught the Pullman train right across, and they thought we were in shorts and shirts. They thought we were Boy Scouts.
Yes. She's just imagine like
We went to a place just out of Boston, Massachusetts, called Camp Miles Standish, And there they gave us leave for 3 or 4 days, so we all piled down in New York and spent 2 or 3 days there wandering around and climbing up the highest building at that time. And then we travelled back to Camp Standish. A couple of days later they decided that we were going to come across to the UK. And we travelled down by train to the key of the bays. And there was a row of ships, Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mary, and so forth. And as we were shuffling along, we said, well, we're not going on that one. We're not going on that one. And then we saw one with 4 funnels on, which is the Aquitania. I don't know if you remember that. Aquitania.
Yes, I do. You know, you've said that, yes.
And it was mainly American troops that were on board, but there were quite a few Aussies, but not in, only in the hundreds, not in the thousands. The accommodation wasn't the best,
No, you bet.
but nevertheless, we were sitting out in the you know, alleyway or something there, outside the bosun's cabin. And one bloke came out and he said, "Any of you blokes from Perth in WA?" The door stuck in my hand. He said the food on there was mainly molasses and so forth. And he said, every morning he said, you come across and sit there, and he said, when the bosuns are finished and their breakfast, he said, I'll give you a nod and we'll pile in and you can have the normal food. Which was greatly appreciated by us.
Yes, I bet.
The trip across from New York or wherever it was the boats were leaving from to, I think we landed in Glasgow, and that only took a few days. We then boarded a train down through to Brighton, where was a disembarkation point, and we were ensconced in the places like the Grand Hotel.
Wow. Didn't get that, would you?
And we were there for a little while, and then I did a course converted to the English wireless, which is
This is very different to...
it was different. We converted and we went to a place called, I think it was Kerry Sheridan.
Kerry Sheridan, yeah. Do you went up Nans and Anson's, isn't it?
I can't remember.
No.
I can't remember. On completion of that, we then went to a place just outside Blackpool, whose name I forget. But it was on the opposite side of, where did I say there? Liverpool. Yeah. It was on the opposite side, North Wales, I think we were in.
Oh.
A place up there, just opposite. Is Liverpool up there?
Yeah, Liverpool, yeah, and then we just...
What's on the other side of the water?
It's a good question. Was it Rill? There's Rills on the top end.
Can't remember the name of the place, but we were actually overlooking where we competed, of course, I think on machine guns, and on one of the training exercises out of there, we were fighting on drogues and so forth. There were pops coming up like that, and evidently we were flying through an artillery firing range aircraft. The pilot decided he better get out of there quick.
Yeah, so I wouldn't want to be touring the turkey plane. There's also some clever person that would think, oh, see how close we can
Let's see how close we can get.
After completing successfully that course, we then went to Blackpool for a few days on our way to Orness up in Scotland, where we were to crew up in the team. And the pilot that we were allotted with was called Good, who was a West Australian. He used to have a mine up in out of Broome. We met the other members of the crew, and we spent a couple of weeks or so up there, flying out into the Atlantic and the North Sea. And one of our last things was we had to fly out and find a crop of islands. I'm not sure what their name was, but they were out miles out not far, where's Fastnet? No. Anyway,
John would tell us, but I don't know.
luckily we negotiated that successfully. But on the way back, the weather closed in, and we were diverted to Oban.
Oh, yes.
And if you've ever travelled down the coast of Scotland,
No,
West
we've got all pilots to come here to one over.
We were basically getting very low on petrol, and basically the navigator wasn't sure where he was.
Oh.
But luckily, as time progressed, he identified the appropriate place to land, and we spent a day or two there, over to a different place. We have that open here. Then we shut up the, what do they call it, the monsters in the
Loch-Ness,
Inverness,
Inverness.
thing, up the area, up here to
Small boats.
back to Orness. And after completing the course, we travelled back down to Pembroke Dock and did the normal welcome, etc.,
Yes.
and accommodation and so forth.
And where were you billeted then?
You know the road that goes along
London Road?
you know the road that we came in today out there, the road that comes along here and you turn in?
Outside the thing, yeah?
Yeah, and further
Yeah.
along. They were all, and she will help me here, they were all hospitals.
Yeah,
That's it,
isolation
yeah,
hospital. I was there with scarlet fever,
Oh.
Yeah. and
And
that's where they were billeted.
they were in that time, they were
So,
built.
that's- oh, what's it called? Is it Sunderland Avenue then?
I don't know.
Sunderland Avenue now, I bet it won't come up then, it was just
You were
tense.
nearly shot down on your 21st birthday.
Yeah, that was when we were over in,
Oh, happy birthday, eh?
that was, unfortunately I can't remember the place opposite Liverpool where that happened. Yeah. And as I say, we were billeted there, and we then proceeded to get used to Air Force life.
Yes.
And we used to go out and on learning curves and so forth, and
Yes.
well,
The roads are a lot different now to when you were here, a lot different.
you had your hangars there, and you used to
That's right. So how long were you to Corton then before you were married then? That was...
well, naturally the war ended in May '45, and the Japanese war didn't end until
No.
August, when they dropped the atom bomb. there were a few Australians left on the squadron to fly the Sunderland flying boats out to the Far East.
Yes,
Because
yes.
that, we were going more or less changing areas. Then
Went out to look for those Americans.
No, whatever. Then there was the war ended in May 45. Yes. Some of us at the time went up to London to participate in the celebrations, but not for long. But then a couple of blokes, very important blokes from America, disappeared off La Palma or something. And they made up a mock crew, of which I was one, and which is in the book there, with another, and we went out and we were basically the last all-Australian RAAF crew to be on an operation from the World War II. But in the intervening period, of course, we did patrols for U-boats down the Bay of Biscay, out in the Atlantic, up at Trondheim in Norway. I'll tell you a story about that one a little later. We were patrolling the English Channel. I more or less hit the squadron around about D-Day, around about that area of time. We did convoy escorts. We did 1,000 bomber, did 1,000 bomber A-block alone, as I think I mentioned that earlier on. And we were patrolling up and down there. We got diverted on the way home. We finished up on one trip landing in the Atlantic Ocean near St Mary's and staying there for a few days. By the time we were diverted because of the weather, and we stayed at, was it Calshot or something?
Yeah.
On the coast, yeah. And another time we went up to, what's the name of the place? Solon Road. Solon Road.
That's good, they work off each other, don't they?
On Solon Road, there was nothing there but a couple of cabins, you know, and
The crew was missing.
sheep, so forth. Anyway, when we hit the mooring place there was a couple of blokes on the pier. I said, "Is your plane serviceable?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Oh, that's good." He said, "We've got to go out on patrol and ours is unserviceable at the moment and it's being fixed." So we offloaded all our gear, and later the same day they called us out to go on patrol. About 9 o'clock at night, I think. And we got on, their plane became serviceable, and we got on board. And we travelled up the coast towards Trondheim and all around up all that part doing patrols, not far off the coast, not far off the water, and up and more or less up and down. And when I got on the wireless, we had 4 wireless ones. When I got on my turn of duties, I kept getting this call sign with our code, squadron call sign, with the exception of the last letter. And I reported this to the Sky, and this kept on for some time. The patrol was a reasonable length. This was for some time. and they were coming up every now and again. And obviously, what had happened, so we subsequently found out, was massive sprints came out of the fields up there, and it was shot down and all killed. So it's recorded in the books there. And that plane was never recovered until after, some time after the boys had ended. All unfortunately were killed.
Yes.
After that we went back to Pembroke Dock after a period up there. We were relieved and we went back to Pembroke Dock. And we carried out whatever was required of us at the time.
When you go to the
That
ships,
was Jorgensen's crew, wasn't it?
I think so. I'm not sure. It's in it's in one of these publications.
when you go watching the convoys, how long would you go out and come back?
Most of my trips were 12 hours. The longest trip was 16 hours, and that was the one off the land with the $1,000. Unfortunately, I haven't got my logbook with me, but that would indicate the date, everything else.
Yes.
What else was there? Then it was, you know, like long.
Eh?
Wilkinson?
Gilderson, yeah.
Wilkinson. What
yeah.
was his Christian name?
Yeah, he went missing,
What?
the crew.
What
I
was,
said
what
that-
was his Wilkinson?
Eh? Oh,
The bloke with the long
Sweet Pete,
sweet, yeah, what was his name?
Joe Wilkinson,
Joe? Was it?
yes.
Joe Wilkinson.
Yeah.
Hey, what
But
was
his
he?
name was Alphonse, yeah,
Alphonse.
yeah.
Alphonse.
Yeah. Don't worry around, you've got the
Alphonse.
one's better than the thing.
Oh,
Brandon stuff.
Well, I met them all, Jen, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we want,
That's
information.
good.
This,
But they both knew. They weren't just one. They both knew them.
he and the skipper, who I can't remember his name, they were testing some of them that had been serviced and so forth.
It's a boy.
And they were in the haven there, and somehow, something for some reason, and poor old Alphonse was looking over the pilot, looking over the pilot, you know, the pilot's flying the plane, he was always looking over.
He went through the fuselage.
Well, what, you jumping ahead there.
Well, he did.
And anyway, they were coming in, and for some unknown godly reason, they didn't see this dirty, great big metal
Yeah, like a board in there.
where they moored.
What the boy, the
Island.
penises used to be tied up to.
Where the violence for the ships used to be tied up, or something. And they hit it, and of course, Alphonse,
And he went through
he
the,
went straight through the
Windscreen.
all his face.
screen and he had all
Oh, dear.
I went to see him in hospital and he was a mess.
he was one of the ones that used to come down the cafe.
Ah.
And he actually, when we had a couple of reunions, or when we had a reunion in WA, Bull Creek, which is not far from here, not far from us, they have a...
They used to call him Sweet Pete
They used to
because
call
he was a little guy and he used to wear this raincoat and used to come right down like Popeye.
Did his face heal up? Was it alright after?
Did he recover, Mum?
Yes, he came back.
Did he recover?
Yes, yes,
He came back.
he's
Was he
dead
scared?
now, but
Was he scared?
yes,
Yes.
but his
Ah.
face was, it wasn't the same again
No.
now. And he got Alzheimer's through that accident.